The snow had been falling since midnight, soft and relentless, piling against the split-rail fences like forgotten cotton. The wind howled across the open plains with a sound like a sigh caught between hope and farewell. Out there, where the dirt track faded into white, two small figures trudged forward, their shapes smudged into faint, ghostly outlines. Lila Carver was 9 years old, clutching her younger sister's hand with the fierce grip of someone who'd held it since the cradle and would hold it through the end. Nell, shivering a step behind, wore a patched wool scarf that had once been their father's, now carrying the scent of ash and damp earth rather than pipe smoke and pine. Their boots, thin and worn, were no match for the cold, nor were their legs, nor the sharp ache in Lila's chest as they reached the ridge where the land dipped toward the Harlan stead. They didn't know its name. They only saw smoke curling from the chimney and a barn with doors that didn't groan in the wind. To them, it was a place where someone might still have food. They didn't approach the house. Instead, they veered toward the barn. Lila's voice broke as she whispered, "This way," and Nell followed without question. Inside, the air was kinder, though only just. They burrowed into a heap of straw, curling close, not sleeping but not speaking either, just listening to each other's breaths, to the wind, to the silence of a world that had turned its back on them that morning when their dad died, his hands still wrapped around a whittling knife and the quilt. Near dawn, the barn door creaked open, snow sweeping in like a veil pulled back. A figure stood in the doorway, tall, weathered, wrapped in a coat patched from too many winters. Amos Harlan hadn't expected to find anything but his old mule stirring in the straw. Instead, he found two girls, tangled together like a half-finished promise. He didn't speak, just stared. Lila rose, brittle as a dry twig, and said in a voice too old for her years, "Our dad died this morning. We got nowhere to go. He should have sent them away, toward the town elder's place, or the church, or back to whatever kin they had left." But something in his chest cracked, something that had been hollow since his own loss. He nodded slowly, turned, and walked out. They followed because there was nowhere else to go. Amos's cabin was quieter than a graveyard in summer. The floorboards sighed underfoot, ashamed of the weight. A kettle hung unevenly over the fire, which burned low but steady. The warmth wasn't enough to thaw hands, but it dulled the ache in their bones, promising relief someday. He ladled out stew thick with potatoes, unseasoned, and poured it into 2 chipped bowls. He didn't speak, just set them down. The girls ate in small, careful sips, eyes down. When Nell's spoon clattered to the floor, startled by the hound brushing her legs, Amos reached over, his hands rough and scarred, picked it up, wiped it on his sleeve, and set it back. Not a word passed. Later, they curled up by the hearth. Lila kept one eye cracked open, as if this place might vanish like others before it. Amos sat in his creaking chair, carved the year his wife passed. He rocked slowly, firelight catching the old scar on his jaw, staring at nothing. In the quiet, he saw her again, Clara, pale and fevered in the bed he'd built, her hand gripping his as the midwife turned away. The silence after the baby never cried. The sound of snow on an empty cradle. The blanket the girls now shared had been meant for that child, green with tiny clouds stitched at the edges. He hadn't touched it in years. Lila stirred, half awake, her eyes not begging but weighing, measuring if this man might be safe. Amos met her gaze, nodded once, and a faint trace of calm softened her face before she drifted back to sleep. By mid-morning, the wind had eased. The world outside looked less like a threat and more like something that could be endured. Amos stepped out to chop wood, his swing steady, as if the axe's bite into the log was the only prayer he still believed in. Inside, Lila explored. She found a tarnished mirror, a chipped cup with daisies painted on it, and a wooden bird with a broken wing. She set the bird beside Nell, who was still curled by the fire, snoring softly. The day passed slowly. Amos fed the hound, then the chickens, then himself, all in silence. But when he saw the girls trying to dry their damp socks by the flames, he pulled 2 thick pairs from a trunk in his room and handed them over. Nell's eyes glistened. She tried to say thank you, but it came out as a sob. He just nodded. That night, Lila whispered stories to Nell in the dark, how their dad used to hum while he carved, how he'd once made them matching mittens, how he'd called them his whole sky split in 2. Amos heard it all from his chair, unmoving, silent. But later, when the fire was just embers and he thought they slept, he spoke, voice low, almost afraid of itself. My girl didn't make it past her first breath. Neither girl moved, but Lila, eyes shut, squeezed Nell's hand tighter. The next morning brought clear skies and a biting cold. Amos found a shirt in a trunk, one Clara used to wear when tending the garden. He handed it to Lila, who flushed and held it close. It smelled of cedar and memory. They ate breakfast, oats, more silence. Then Amos spoke. Can't say how long you plan to stay, but there's space. Lila's eyes widened. Nell whispered, we could help with the chickens or sweep. Amos's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Dog feeds himself mostly. But I won't turn down help. Outside, birds sang. Snow dripped from the roof. Far off, chapel bells tolled. The town didn't yet know what had settled at Amos Harlan's place, but he did. That evening, as the sky turned gold with frost and the girls swept the hearth with oversized brooms, Amos pulled a small carving from a shelf, a cradle half-finished. He hadn't touched it in 6 years. He set it on the table, took up his knife, and began carving again. Lila watched from her corner, her breath misting the air, her eyelashes catching lamplight with the faintest trace of frost. She blinked slowly, then smiled. Outside, unseen, a shadow passed the frozen fence. A rider paused, watched, then turned back toward town, toward gossip, toward judgment. Amos didn't know yet, but winter never kept secrets long. The snow didn't so much melt as surrender, seeping into the earth. By week's end, muddy trails crisscrossed the yard, and the chimney puffed steadily. The world began to soften, but the eyes watching it didn't. On Sunday, the whispers found voices, not in shouts but in snickers, behind gloved hands and narrowed gazes. It started at the trading post. Amos Harlan stepped in to barter eggs for flour, his hat dripping with morning thaw. He didn't notice preacher Elias Dunn at first, nor Tom Barrow behind the counter, nor the 2 women eyeing the sack of oats he carried. The silence hit him when he set it down, heavy as a stone. Callan, yourself a father now, Harlan? Tom asked, voice thick with a grin. Amos didn't turn, didn't answer. He took his flour, paid with a quiet clink, and left. The laughter followed him like a stray dog. At home, Nell had nicked her finger on a broken plate. Lila tried to wrap it with a scrap of cloth, whispering, hush, it's small. When Amos returned, he said nothing, just took Nell's hand and bound it with a clean handkerchief, not tied carefully. She looked up. Dad used to tie knots like that, she murmured. Soft, like nothing was even hurt. Amos's face stayed still, but when he turned to stoke the fire, his shoulders sagged just a fraction. 2 nights later, Sarah Dunn arrived, her scarf knotted tight, breath fogging in the cold. She carried a bundle, bread, a length of blue wool. She hesitated to knock. Amos opened the door, as if he'd sensed her. For the girls, she said softly. They'll need cloth food. He looked at her, not unkindly, but like a man unused to gifts. I know it ain't my place, she added, but the Lord don't like seein' children cold. Amos stepped aside. Lila and Nell peered from the corner, eyes wary but warming at the sight of bread. Sarah didn't linger. She brushed Nell's hair once, then left quickly, as if she'd overstepped. Before going, she touched Amos's arm lightly and said, They're mendin' dot. He nodded. They're hurt where folks don't see. The town saw them next at chapel. It took coaxing. Lila had smoothed her hair, and Nell wore the blue shirt Sarah had brought. Amos stood behind them on the steps, silent as snow. The girls walked hand in hand, boots too big, eyes bright as candles. Inside, pews creaked, whispers wove through hymns. Preacher Dunn's sermon spoke of propriety, how wolves sometimes wore shepherds' cloaks, how not every open door was godly. Amos didn't look up. The girls didn't stir. After Tom Barrow approached, his smile sharp as a blade. Didn't know you'd taken to raising kids, Harlan. They just stay if you feed 'em. Amos's jaw tightened. They eat here, he said. That's all. Preacher Dunn stepped in, eyes cold as the river. Some say it ain't right, a man keeping girls with no kin. Invites talk. Amos met his gaze, long and steady. Let him talk. Outside, the wind stirred dust. Sarah stood by the fence, her face pale, unreadable. Sarah Dunn watched Amos Harlan guide the girls down the chapel steps, his broad shoulders steady, unyielding under the town's sidelong glances. No one extended a hand to greet them. That afternoon, Amos carved by the shed while Lila and Nell played nearby, weaving tales from sticks and stones. One story cast their father as a raven circling above the cedars, watching over them. Another turned Amos into a wolf who prowled the barn at night to keep it safe. Their laughter rang out, light and unguarded, unaware of how silence could thicken into something heavy. Amos worked his knife through a piece of wood with quiet care, shaping a small deer this time, giving it delicate legs. The next morning, a note was pinned to his gatepost. Ain't right what you're doing. Let the town handle them before trouble comes. The script slanted sharp, like Preacher Dunn's sermon voice. Amos didn't show the girls. He tossed the note into the stove, watching the flames eat the words as if they were nothing but kindling, not a cold warning. That night, the wind rose again. The girls curled by the hearth as Amos sharpened his axe, not with anger but with rhythm, the way a man splits logs to remember his own strength. Lila spoke up, her voice small but steady. "Are we trouble, Mr. Harlan?" He turned, caught off guard. "Why'd you ask that?" "'Cause folks stare like we're wrong, like we took something." Amos knelt beside her. "You didn't take nothing. You lost more than most'll ever know. That don't make you trouble." Nell whispered, "Then why do they whisper?" Amos had no answer, but he tucked the wool blanket tighter around Nell's shoulders and said, "Some folks whisper 'cause they're scared. Or cruel. Or both." Nell stared into the fire, her eyes catching something new. Lila slid into her lap, gripping her hand. For a long moment, they stayed still. Later, with the girls asleep, Amos stepped onto the porch. Snow fell again, slow and drifting, like embers from a distant blaze. The silence wasn't peace, it was waiting. Across the dark field, a lantern flickered, then vanished. Someone was watching. The next day, Sarah returned, a faint bruise shadowing her jaw. She said nothing of it, just handed Amos a bundle of thread and a single pair. "He's trying to keep me from coming," she murmured. Amos pressed the pair into Nell's hands. "Then don't let him." "I don't know if I can." "You already are." Her lips parted, but no words came. Her fingers brushed his, leaving a fleeting warmth as she turned into the wind. That evening, Nell trimmed her hair. Lila helped, saying it was to feel stronger. Amos didn't stop them. He sat on the porch after supper, the girls inside humming a fractured lullaby. He scanned the road and spotted fresh hoofprints in the snow. He stood, walked to the shed, and lifted the rifle he hadn't touched in 4 winters. He held it briefly, then set it back. Some fights didn't need lead, just a man who wouldn't bend. From the trees beyond the cedars, laughter drifted, not the girls' joy, but men's voices, sharp and waiting. The sky darkened by afternoon, bruised gray, heavy with the promise of snow. The air felt alive, taut, like it was holding its breath. Amos knew that cold. It settled in your bones before the storm arrived, the kind that made men double-check their shutters and stack extra wood. Lila and Nell had been playing by the stream, gathering flat stones to paint with charcoal and berry juice. Their laughter had grown bolder over the week, and Lila's humming, once rare, now threaded through the air like a quiet stitch. Amos heard it through the open window while splitting kindling, a tune without words but steady, like she was mending herself note by note. He didn't want to break the moment, but the storm would, and soon. "Girls," he called, wiping his hands. "Come inside." They ran in, cheeks red, hair wild, mittens soaked. Nell held a painted stone. "This one's for the shelf," she said, breathless. "It's like a star." Amos took it, turning it in his hand. It was more jagged than starry, but he nodded. "Reckon the house could use one." Inside, the fire snapped as the wind began to moan. Lila hung their coats by the stove. Nell spun slow circles by the hearth, her bare feet scuffing the floor. Then it happened. The shirt Sarah had given Nell, the blue one she cherished like it was woven from moonlight, caught on a nail by the fireplace. The tear was quick, a sharp rip down the seam. Nell froze, staring at the gash, then at Lila, then at Amos. Her face crumpled, not with sobs, but with a silent grief deeper than tears. She sank to the floor, clutching the fabric, shoulders trembling, lips quivering like she'd lost something sacred again. "It's all right," Lila said, kneeling beside her. "We'll fix it." Nell shook her head. "It was the only thing that made me feel clean." Amos stood at the room's edge, feeling like an intruder in someone else's sorrow. He didn't know how to soothe the child's tears, but he knew work, knew repair. He knelt beside her. "Let me see." Nell looked up, eyes wet. "Can you sew?" He paused. "Not good, but I'll be careful." They cleared the table. He spread the shirt out gently, his hands moving with care. His fingers, rough from years of rope and axe, weren't made for delicate work, but he found Clara's old sewing kit in a drawer. The tin creaked, as if it remembered her too. The girls watched as he threaded the needle, squinting in the firelight, pulling slow stitches through the torn cloth. Each stitch woke something in him, a memory of the day he'd buried his wife and the future they'd planned. Lila fetched buttons. Nell offered a thimble. They sat in a circle of lamplight and held breath, watching a man who spoke through wood and iron try to mend a girl's heart with blue thread. Outside, the wind clawed at the windows. The storm hit hard, snow swirling like ash from a burning sky. "Blizzard," Amos muttered. "Came fast." He handed Nell the shirt. The seam was uneven but whole. She held it like it was a treasure. "Thank you," she whispered. "It's better now." Amos turned away, uneasy with the ache her words stirred. "Need to keep the fire going tonight," he said, standing. "And get the animals in the barn." Lila followed him to the door. "Can we help?" He nodded. "If you wear socks." She grinned. They moved quickly, the wind nearly ripping the barn door from its hinges. Amos secured it as Lila held the lantern. Inside, the animals shifted, uneasy. The hound pressed against Nell as she murmured to calm the goats. By the time they returned, snow clung to their hair, and Nell's hands were pink with cold. Amos wrapped her in the blanket. Lila boiled pine needle tea. They huddled by the hearth, a small stronghold against the howling white. Then came the knock. 3 sharp raps on the door. Amos stood. The girls tensed. The knock came again, louder. He opened it slowly. Preacher Dunn stood there, snow dusting his coat, eyes hard as stone. Behind him, Tom Barrow and Old Man Greer held lanterns, their faces cold as the storm. "Evening," Dunn said. "Heard the blizzard was coming. Thought we'd check on you." Amos didn't budge. "We're fine. You got kids in there, Harlan," Dunn said. "Town's got questions. They're warm. Federal safe." Greer shifted. "Safe ain't what folks are saying, Dot." Amos's grip tightened on the door. "Then folks should mind their own houses." Dunn leaned closer. "This ain't just about you. It's about what's right." Amos's jaw ticked. "Right don't keep a child warm. Kindness does." Nell stepped forward, wearing the patched blue shirt, her face calm. "He fixed this," she said softly. "He saved it." Greer looked away. Barrow snorted, muttering, "Shouldn't be here." Dunn's eyes narrowed. "Storm or not, this'll need settling soon." Amos didn't flinch. "Come back when the snow's gone. I'll be here." He shut the door, firm, like a line carved in ice. The girls said nothing. They didn't need to. That night, the storm roared. But inside, the cabin glowed with something stronger than fire. Nell slept in her shirt. Amos carved the deer again, giving it a lifted head. Come morning, he'd hang it by the window, but the hoof prints were already back, deeper now. The thaw came with dripping roofs and ice cracking from branches in sharp, sudden snaps. The world softened, brown earth peeking through the white, but with the thaw came visitors, their boots leaving more than tracks. A letter appeared on Amos's porch, folded neatly, sealed with the town council's wax. It spoke of concern, of propriety, of risk, stating that Lila and Nell Carver, named without warmth, were to be sent to proper authorities within the week for their safety and the town's peace. Amos read it twice, his thumb pressing the wax until it broke. Inside, Lila was showing Nell how to weave straw into rings. They laughed, legs tucked under, hair catching sunlight like threads of gold. Amos watched, the letter heavy in his hand. He didn't interrupt, but something in his chest, quiet all winter, began to burn. That evening, he tacked the letter to the shed door. The next day, Preacher Dunn arrived alone, gloved, his air of judgment sharp as frost. "This ain't mercy, Harlan," he said. "It's trouble." Amos met his gaze, unflinching. "Only trouble here is what folks bring with them." "You know why I'm here," Preacher Dunn said, his voice sharp as the morning frost. Amos Harlan wiped his hands on his coat. "'Cause folks don't like what they can't figure." Dunn's mouth tightened. "A man alone, keeping girls with no kin. There are boundaries, Harlan." "They came to me with death at their backs," Amos said. "They weren't after sermons. They needed to live. Now they're settled. They shouldn't have to leave." Dunn glanced toward the barn, where Nell's laughter floated up, light as a sparrow's call. "Your intentions might be good, but that don't make this right. The town sees. The town talks." "Don't care what they talk," Amos said. Dunn's eyes narrowed. "You will. They vote tomorrow." Amos stayed silent as Dunn left, standing in the doorway long after, watching the sun sink behind the ridge like it was turning away. At supper, Lila asked what relocate meant. Amos said it meant someone thought they'd be safer elsewhere. Nell frowned. "But we're safe here." "You said so." Amos nodded slowly. "Thought so too." The next morning, 3 wagons rolled up. Men with clipped voices stepped down, clutching ledgers like shields. Tom Barrow smirked as usual. Old Man Greer avoided Amos's gaze. A younger man, unfamiliar, clean-shaven, shifted nervously. They wore their authority like heavy coats. Amos stood on the porch, hat low. Behind him, the door creaked, and 2 sets of small footsteps crossed the floor. Lila stepped out first, now clutching her hand. Both wore their Sunday shirts, faces pale but steady. Neither cried. "We're here for the girls," the young man said. "It's been decided." Not by me, Amos replied. It ain't your call, Tom snapped. It was when no one else opened a damn door. Tom stepped closer. Don't make this ugly, Harlan. This ain't a fight. Ain't it? Amos said softly. Feels like a theft. The young man shifted, uneasy. We've arranged for them to go to the county home. It's proper, temporary. Amos looked at Lila, then Nell. Lila's grip on her sister's hand tightened. You promised, she whispered. You said this was home. Amos knelt. The men didn't hear, but the girls did. I meant it. Nell's voice shook. Don't let them. Amos stood. You want them, you'll have to take me too. Silence hung like frost. Greer blinked. What's that? You heard me. I won't let them go. Not without me. You can't bargain, Tom said. Ain't bargaining. I'm setting a line. The young man glanced at Tom, uncertain. He can't stay with them legally. They ain't cattle, Amos snapped. They're people. Mine as much as anyone's ever been. You'll lose your land, Greer warned. Then I'll sleep in the snow with them. You'll be locked up. Then they'll lock up a man for keeping his word. Lila's eyes shone. Nell grabbed Amos's hand, holding it like a rope in a storm. The air shifted. The girls' silence cut deeper than any cry. They knew loss, knew leaving. They'd forgotten what it felt like to be fought for. Tom opened his mouth, but the young man raised a hand. We'll talk this over. Come back tomorrow. Do that, Amos said. I'll be here. The wagons rattled off, pride bruised. Sarah arrived an hour later, mud on her skirt, face tight. I heard, she whispered. Amos nodded, words failing him. She stepped inside, saw the girls sweeping the hearth with small brooms, pretending they hadn't heard at all. Sarah knelt beside them. Do you want to stay? Nell looked up. More than anything. Sarah stood, turned to Amos. Then I'm helping. He studied her, torn between gratitude and worry for her cost. Your father won't take kindly to this. I'm not doing it for him, she said. I'm doing it for them. And you. That night, Amos didn't sleep. He sat in his chair as the girls slept under the cloud-stitched blanket. The fire glowed low. Snow fell again, soft, like a whisper against the window. He carved slowly, not a deer this time, but two small mittens, tiny side by side. At dawn, hoofbeats sounded urgent, not the council's heavy roll. The second dawn broke colder, sharper, the air still as if the hills held their breath. The sky was clear but heavy, like a choice already made. Amos didn't eat. He sat by the hearth, coat on, boots tied. The fire crackled faintly. The girls were up early. Lila dressed herself, Nell's coat buttoned crooked until Amos fixed it quietly. No plans were spoken, just a shared rhythm, as if they all knew the day would shift everything. By mid-morning, the wagons returned, heavier this time. 7 men in total. The council, preacher Dunn, 2 hired men with hard faces, and Sarah's father leading. Their horses churned the cold earth. The girls saw them through the window. Nell gripped Lila's hand. Lila didn't flinch. Amos stood, glancing at the carved mittens he'd left on the table. He opened the door, wind biting his chest. He didn't waver. Mr. Harlan, Dunn said, collar tight as his voice. We gave you time. And I gave you my answer. This ain't a home, Dunn said, nodding at the cabin. It's a man's stubborn dream. More home than where they came from. We're here to save them from sin. The word stung like smoke. Amos didn't bite. You call it sin. I call it keeping my word. Tom spat. We ain't debating with a rancher. Greer spoke softer. They're girls, Harlan. They need a mother, not a man's house. They need safety. Love. I give them that. You can't, Dunn said. Not how the town sees it. Amos called Lila Nell. The door creaked. The girls stepped out, coats thin but spines straight. Lila's face was stone. Nell's lip quivered but held. They can't take us, Nell whispered. Amos nodded. Not without me. One hired man, weathered and broad, stepped forward but stopped when he met Lila's steady gaze. I'd rather not, he muttered. Dunn's mouth twisted. You'd let this stand? Nell moved to Amos, her fingers curling into his. He didn't find us. We found him. Tom's voice rose. This ain't a discussion. We got law. We got a vote. Lila stepped up. No. You got a room of scared men yelling. Her words silenced them, heavy as snow. Even Greer looked down. Dunn growled. He's not their kin. Sarah emerged from the trees, bonnet loose, cheeks flushed from the cold walk. Her voice was clear. Then make him kin. Every head turned. She stepped beside the girls, then Amos, her gloved hand finding his. You called it sin, she said. I call it family. Dunn blinked. You don't know what you're saying. I do, she replied. Leaving 2 girls to freeze ain't proper either. Greer muttered. She's not your wife, Harlan. She will be, Amos said quietly. Sarah looked at him, a small, steady smile forming, not sudden but rooted deep. She already is, he added. The girls pressed closer, foreheads against his coat. Lila spoke. You taking all 4 of us? Got room in that wagon. Dunn's jaw worked, silent. Tom turned. Let's go, he muttered. This ain't worth it. One by one they left. Greer nodded faintly before turning his horse. Dunn lingered, eyes on Sarah, a flicker of shame passing before he rode off. Amos stood until the hoofbeats faded. His breath fogged like a weight lifting. Inside, Nell whispered, They gone? Gone, Amos said. Sarah stepped in, looking at the cabin like it was new. Guess this makes it real. You sure? Amos asked. Never been sure, she said. Outside, the wind softened. The trees leaned toward the cabin like kin. That evening, Amos set the carved mittens beside the deer above the hearth. Lila curled by his chair. Nell brought her painted stones. Sarah warmed cider, humming low. Amos said little. He didn't need to. In the fire's crackle, in Sarah's fingers brushing his as they shared the cup, there was no grand gesture, just belonging, the kind that needs no proof. Later, Amos stood on the porch. Snow fell gently like lace. He looked where 7 men had come to take everything and left with nothing. Sarah stepped beside him. They'll talk, she said. Let 'em, Amos replied. You kept them. No, he said, eyes warm. They kept me. The fire glowed behind the windows. A bird called from the hills, not lost, just heard. The mittens on the hearth stayed side by side, untouched. Some families aren't born of blood. Some are born the day you choose to hold on. Thank you for watching the video. Please like and subscribe if you love this video, and share your loved on.